So one of the primary ways that archaeologists find ancient places is through the techniques of survey. Ancient places very often leave signatures on the ground, even if they've decayed and otherwise you wouldn't see a whole lot of traces of them. And largely this is through artifacts. So what we do when we think we know where there's a site is we walk back and forth across and just look for artifacts on the surface. So that's what I'm going to be doing at this site behind me, largely under this village. Appears to be a medieval Islamic settlement with a really fantastic ancient landscape around it. I can tell it's a site already because as soon as I got out of the vehicle, there's just loads of pottery and broken pieces of baked brick on the ground. We'll be able to date the site very well because artifacts on the surface are so abundant. So we are out doing survey. I am walking a transect through an area near a medieval village. I'm looking at the ground, seeing what I can find. Visibility is not great, but still I can see that there are some artifacts. Here's a piece of pottery. It's not terribly diagnostic, so I won't collect it. Let's continue on. Here's another one. This one has some incision. That might be diagnostic, so I'll hang on to that one. This is not great visibility. There was a crop here that hasn't been grazed by animals, so it's kind of hard to see the ground because of all of this stubble from the cereal field. This is also, by archaeological standards, this is pretty low density. There's not a whole lot here. That's kind of typical of late archaeological sites because in later periods people didn't use as much pottery. In later periods people used things like glass and metal for utensils, serving vessels, whereas in earlier periods they would have used ceramics. So it's not surprising to find fewer potsherds on Islamic and later sites. All right, in this area, I'm doing another transect. Here the problem isn't a light sherd scatter, it's too much. Very abundant artifacts here. Everything you see here is either a broken piece of pottery or a fragmentary fired brick. Probably there were some pretty nice houses here. Here's a nice glazed sherd. I'll keep that. That's diagnostic. So the surface of this part of the site is particularly rich in artifacts, and not just artifacts like, for example, this is the base of a vessel here, but also stuff like this. This is a piece of fired brick. Most architecture around here was made out of sun-dried brick. You take mud, you take water, you bring them together, you form them into a brick, and you leave them in the sun. But if you really want to create something durable, you could take those bricks and fire them, put them in a kiln, expose them to heat, and they become baked bricks. Fuel was expensive in the past, especially fuel that could fire hot enough to bake something. So when we find baked brick, we assume that whoever had the architecture that used it was probably pretty well-to-do because they could afford this exotic and expensive building material.